everybody. My name's Ross, as he said. I'd just like to take one moment. I'm going to take a deep breath and kind of get centered. I'd like everybody to just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Make a judgment of me. Like, what do you see when you look at me right now? Like, what can you tell about me? You just think to it to yourself. Like, what can you identify about me from looking at me? And then I'll get into my story. I always kind of felt different. One of my earliest memories is a dream I had when I was younger. I was in the back of a moving car and I was trying to steer it, but I couldn't. And that's a good analogy for my life in lots of ways. I was sick often as a kid and I had a lot of attention on me. As I got older, those things kind of changed somewhat. Around 5 or 6, my aunt committed suicide, and I can remember walking on this little frozen creek by my house and thinking that when I die, I'll just things will be cold and dark and I'll be lonely forever. I don't think that's really like a typical thought for somebody who's 5 or 6 years old. Shortly after that, my parents divorced, and a lot of that attention that I used to get was even further removed, and I just started internalizing things, not handling situations well, not processing things correctly, and eventually I started to reach out for attention in negative ways. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, I had my first interaction with the law. I got, police showed up at my high school, my middle school rather, and took me out of class for vandalism, because I had snuck out at night over the previous summer and slashed some tires, slashed a trampoline, broke some windows because I couldn't sleep. I've always kind of had difficulty sleeping throughout my life because of anxiety, paranoia, fear, that kind of stuff. Around 7th grade, to try to deal with how I was feeling inside, I tried pot for the first time. There was some consequences. I didn't get caught, but I still did stupid stuff that kind of got me in trouble. It was at my dad's house. After that, around freshman year, I tried alcohol for the first time. I blacked out. I ended up sleeping behind Ames department store in Austintown in the middle of February underneath a mattress covered in broken glass and mud. And that was so fun that I continued to drink and party, and things just kept kind of like really started to spiral out of control. Junior year of high school, I was arrested for pot. Actually, I take that back. Junior year of high school, I was put in rehab for pot, and then senior year of high school, I was taken out of class and arrested for having weed on my person. I was spent the next year and a half or so in the juvenile drug court program. It was supposed to be a 9-month program, but I kept getting dirty urine, so it made it longer. After that, I just kind of floated through life. I had a girlfriend at the time who her and I kept getting back together, breaking up, all this kind of stuff. And one of the times when her and I were broken up, I decided to go to culinary school. I went to culinary school, finished that, got my degree, and then I moved out to Las Vegas. Things out there were, I ended up homeless within a short time because my dad was out there, but he went through my stuff, found all this weed that I had left over from my road trip out there. So I consciously was like, I'm just going to go live on the street, I'll show you. I ended up staying with a friend. And this whole kind of pattern of running away from stuff, not knowing how to deal with things, kind of taking everything personally, just kept getting worse in my life in lots of ways. I got a DUI when I was in Vegas. A girl who I had move out there with me, her and I were together for about a year or so, on and off, but it just progressively got worse because I was drinking all the time, smoking weed all the time. Kitchen work, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol associated with it. And then Las Vegas, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol associated with Las Vegas too. Her and I broke up. I was moving to Washington State to go run a kitchen at a summer camp there. I got pulled over in Jackpot, Nevada, with pot. They thought I was drunk, but I hadn't even been drinking. I got a DUI. I had never actually even gone to court for the first DUI either, because I never got anything in the mail. So I had second DWI on a suspended license for a DUI. So that's not very favorably, it's not looked upon very favorably rather. So I kind of got out of that situation. I got bailed out, and then I ended up going to Washington State, driving without a license all the way from Nevada up there. And I'm going to fast forward it a bit. I moved around a bunch after that. Lots of empty relationships, lots of alcohol, lots of drugs. And around summer of 2012, winter of 2012, I met another woman. Her and I dated for a while. We decided to kind of quit drinking. And at first when I quit drinking, like, everything seemed to be going okay. The issue with it was, that's how I learned to deal with kind of everything in my life. And shortly thereafter, I just started to feel like really stressed out, anxious. So I started smoking a lot more weed. I was up in the Emerald Triangle of Northern California at that time, so there was a bunch of pot up there. Eventually, I had this situation where I couldn't sleep. I didn't eat for like 3 days. I started having these really weird thoughts. It felt like I was getting a whole bunch of information downloaded or something. That's the only way I can really describe it. Like, I was writing almost nonstop at some points where I would write for like hours, just at different things. And I went to see my ex-girlfriend. Her and I were still dating at the time, and she could kind of tell something was up, but she didn't know what to do. I walked back from her house 7 miles or so back to my apartment because she was trying to get me to ride the bus, but I thought that she was trying to trick me to get onto the bus. Like, this paranoia started to set in. After that, I was at home, and I went to get some food to eat, and I thought that some of the people at the grocery store were out to get me, trying to get money off of me. I thought one of them was actually an alien. Just all these things, and it kept progressively getting weirder to the point where I was walking down the street to get out of my apartment because I thought people were coming to get me, and the police stopped me. And I thought that one was a good cop and one was a bad cop. Not like the cliche movie, good cop, bad cop. Like, literally, one was a representative of like the forces of good and one was a representative of the forces of evil. But they would switch roles based upon their who was looking at who, like their eye positioning. That's the only way I can describe it. They ended up taking me to the psych ward. I didn't even know who I was at one point. They asked me my name, and I thought I was the singer Jack Johnson. They were like, "Tell us one of your songs." And I'm like, "You know the song Bubble Toes?" Which is one of Jack Johnson's songs. But yeah, so I ended up in the psych ward, and that was just a horrifying experience in and of itself. Psychosis is a really difficult thing to explain in a logical way because it's so illogical. But I went there, they gave me medication, they said that I had bipolar disorder, and then they just kind of let me back out into the world. My mom came out to get me out of the hospital, so I had some kind of normalness in that sense. She flew all the way out from Ohio out to California to kind of be there for me. But the thing is, even after I was out, I still had all these weird thoughts, and like I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want them to put me back in the psych ward because that's a horrifying experience. So that's kind of just how things went. I eventually ended up losing the girlfriend, losing the job, losing all my friends because I just didn't know how to process all that stuff. I didn't know how to deal with it. I ended up moving back to Ohio. I went back to work briefly. I stopped taking the medication that they had put me on. I worked a job, things fell apart quickly. I worked another job, I quit that. Since I didn't have money, I was trying to not smoke pot because pot's expensive, especially here after living in Northern California. So I got all these different herbs that you can make a tea with, reduce them down, and then I ingested that, which wasn't a good idea at all. Ended up going to psychosis again, ended up in the hospital again, and this time it was way worse. I kept kind of getting somewhat normal and doing different things to screw up my head even more. It was just really a difficult time for me and for my family members, for everybody involved. There was a point though, basically for the better part of a whole year I was psychotic, but there was a point in around April of, that would have been 2013 or so, where my psychosis was starting to like go in a way where it was terrifying me into somewhat doing the right thing, if that makes sense to anybody. And I started to kind of evaluate how I was living. Like, I started going to a 12-step meeting for alcoholism. I was still smoking pot, but that kind of helped me get my head situated a little bit better. I took the medication. I tried to do everything I could that they told me to do to kind of balance myself out. Started to try to do more, socialize more. And then for a year or so, it kind of stayed there. That would have been, actually that was 2014. Around 2015, 2016, I tried to progress a little bit more. And they actually, my doctor at that time told me that my condition wasn't bipolar disorder, that what I had was drug-induced psychosis, which I couldn't believe that. I was like, I've been smoking weed since I was like 12 or 13 years old. You don't know what you're talking about. I was so arrogant that I thought I knew more than a doctor who'd been doing this for longer than I'd been alive. So in the long run, I eventually gave up pot over this summer. I stopped drinking. I started to go to 12-step meetings. I've started exercising, eating healthy, meditating, doing yoga, doing all these different things, and getting my life together. A year ago, if you would tell me that I'd be standing up in front of a room with this many people, I would think that you were high. Like, there was no way that I would do it. I feel comfortable with it because I have to own my story, and I'm not a bad person because I did those things. It wasn't that I wanted to put myself in harm's way. I didn't know any better, and I thought that I was doing the right thing for me. I had a lot of different experiences with police, almost every state that I've been in, whether it was when I lived in the Florida Keys, whether it was when I was in Vegas, Washington, Northern California. I've had interactions with the police. And out west, I had a lot better interactions with the police in lots of ways because they treated me like a person. They treated me with respect. Locally, most of my involvement with the police locally hasn't been as favorable because a lot of them come in with this dominating attitude. And if you look at psychology, there's the fight or flight mechanisms. And when people come in very aggressive, especially with somebody who's having mental health situations, that's not going to put them in, if they're not able to rationalize or think in a proper fashion, they're more likely to react negatively. And I understand that in your position, you have to really evaluate those situations carefully. But yeah, my life has taught me so much, and I used to see police as these people that just wanted to ruin my buzz and lock me up, and a negative influence. Now when I look at and I interact with police, I see people, because you can be a person before you're a police officer, and those ones are the ones that I resonate with, the ones that treat me like an individual, like a person, not just some dude who probably has drugs on him or somebody that's having like some kind of mental health situation. And I think that a lot of people can kind of pick up on that, like whether or not you're being genuine or not. But yeah, I just have a lot of respect for the police now because in many ways they actually did save my life. One of the things that really hit home with me after one of the DUIs is the guy's like, I could send you home, but I'm going to take you in for your own safety and so you don't hurt anybody else. And that makes total sense to me. Even though I was drunk, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, this isn't about you doing this to me. Like, and that's the other thing too. I used to actually blame a lot of people for all my problems. This is this person's problem. Those cops in high school, they arrested me. They did it all wrong. What I realize now is, had I not put myself in all those situations, none of that stuff would have happened. I don't know. Life has really taught me a lot through all my mistakes. That's really all I have to say about myself. If anybody has any questions, anything, feel free to ask.
How old are you, Russ?
I just turned 33.
I put you in 28. 33.
Well, thank you. I must have a youthful appearance. Yes, sir.
You said that the site house was really like a scary experience for you. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
It wasn't they did anything wrong. It's just that kind of having to be restrained, giving medication that you don't know what it is, especially when you're kind of in psychosis and already paranoid about all this stuff. Like, one of the things that I thought was that they were taking me to a place to get me off of the planet because I wasn't around like real humans. Like, because I couldn't understand how people could treat everybody the way that they do. It doesn't make sense to me still, but I realized that I'm on the real planet. Like, yeah, it was just more so internally what was going on. They didn't do anything wrong, really. Yes, sir.
How did you cope with your situation before you got the help that you needed?
I really didn't. Drugs, extreme paranoia, isolation. I did a little bit of music, poetry, art, very internal stuff. I play guitar too, so some of that, like, it was not a lot of coping, not a lot of healthy coping mechanisms, I would say. So I'm fortunate to have learned good ones now. Yes, sir.
The bad interactions that you had with law enforcement, what were some of the things that maybe you feel that the law enforcement possibly did wrong that you could give them advice on what they probably should think about doing?
Coming on aggressive right away when there's not necessarily a need to, and I understand in certain situations that makes sense that you have to do it. I don't think that I'm ever really a threat to anybody or that I could look threatening. I'm not a very aggressive person. So when somebody comes up to me and is aggressive for no reason, it just makes me shut down, not kind of cooperate with them. Charges for it, but I'm not going to tell you what's going on, and I'm not going to trust you if you come at me aggressively.
You don't look aggressive, but
I'm not.
can you give examples aggression of the police force, the law enforcement to you?
Just the attitude that they come up, like, I'm sure you can tell if somebody's being aggressive sometimes without them even saying anything or doing something. I don't know if you can, like, the way that people's body position, body language, the way that their eyes are furrowed, things like that, tone of voice, the way that the line of questioning goes. I got pulled over this summer and I wasn't doing anything wrong, and the police officer said, "Where's the drugs? We're gonna search your car." I'm like, I didn't even do anything. The car doesn't even smell like weed. Like, so that kind of stuff there is difficult to deal with, and it's part of the reason I feel that some people don't trust police officers because of things like that.
You say you found this more, it's over here in Ohio.
That's what I've noticed more. Out west, the cops were a lot cooler. When I got pulled over in Washington State at one point, they caught me driving on a suspended license, and the cop said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "We're going over here, waiting for my buddy to get done with this summer camp, then we're going to go down the coast." And he told me, "Get to where you're going, park the car, and if I see you driving, I'm going to write you up. You're going to jail." So, you know what I mean? He was fair with me and let me kind of, he put my word to the test by allowing me to get there and just do what he said. And you know what? I respected that guy. I didn't drive from that spot when I got there.
Would you have any help from law enforcement, like guiding you to see a help or anything like that?
They took me to the psych ward the one time. That was really,
That was the experience.
I mean, when I was in the backs, they were kind of laughing about the things I was saying, not really being very understanding of it.
Were you high at that time or not?
Oh yeah, I was high and I was psychotic, so. Yeah, when I first got out, it was really difficult to deal with that though, because there's already so much stigma associated with mental health, and then being put in a position where you're being taken somewhere against your will, and the people are kind of like mocking you or joking about the experience. It's not easy to deal with, I would say.
All right, guys. We have another speaker, so I don't want to belabor. But Ross, I just want to say thank you. It takes great courage to tell your story. Everyone has a story, but sometimes our stories aren't the story that everyone wants to hear.
Mhm.
And it takes great courage, and we appreciate you coming, and we appreciate, because this really gives us an insight. I picked up on the communication with law enforcement and persons suffering from mental illness or whatever. It is so valuable, because I always look at it this way. The interactions that we have with the people, they will always remember that interaction, because it's very personal to them, because that might be the only officer they ever see in their life, and they will remember that interaction. And if it's negative, that sealed the deal forever, you know. And thankful that you were able to meet some good officers that maybe sowed some good things into you, and you got yourself some help, and we're thankful that you're here to offer that wisdom to us. So communication is key. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
I agree with the lieutenant. Thank you. You had a lot of courage to come over and share with us your story.
Takes great
That's
courage.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.